Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my top pick for historical RTS, as we make history our story. donHaize is the name, and Age of Empires 4 is the game. In this video we take on the 100 Years' War French campaign.
In 1350, what we know as the idyllic French countryside was a living hell. For more than 15 years, the people had suffered at the hands of English invaders. Little did they know that this war would last for another 100 years. But through this crucible of fighting, famine, and plague, there would emerge the modern nation of France. England's King Edward III looked jealously across the English Channel. Wanting France for his own, he had added the fleur-de-lis, the symbol of France, to his own royal standard. This was an all-out declaration of war. And in 1337, he invaded. But France already had a king, Philippe VI. As the English burned their way across the land, Philippe's army and his legendary knights marched to meet them, and came face to face with the English longbow. A simple weapon, but the most devastating the knights had ever faced. The heroes of France fell to storms of English arrows. The war engulfed the French countryside. By 1351, the conflict was focused on Brittany. One fight stands out as a spectacular display of chivalry, and a symbol of the wider conflict between the two enemy nations. The Combat of the 30 is still commemorated here in Brittany. It was a dispute between two local families. Supported by the opposing sides in the war, the French and English commanders decided to settle it through a trial of knightly combat. Each side would choose 30 champions to fight on neutral ground. France prepared to defend itself against England's finest. Intent on ending the suffering of the French peasantry, Sir Jean de Beaumanoir sent a challenge to the English commander. 30 champions on each side would compete in a tournament for final claim to Brittany. With the battleground of the halfway oak agreed upon, Sir Jean set out to gather support from local knights. As a knight himself, Sir Jean followed the strict rules of chivalry and was expected to protect the local peasantry and ensure peace.
Welcome, my friends, to this opening mission of the 100-Year War French campaign. I will say straight off the back, I've had a lot of fun playing this campaign. This is a really good one. And we've got plenty of interesting strategies and tactics to share with you guys, so hopefully you'll enjoy what I'm about to share with you on some of these missions.
Most medieval tournaments were friendly in nature, held for sport and glory, but the Combat of the 30 was arranged between opponents mired in war. English raids had torn through the countryside of Brittany and brought great hardship to the people. Sir Jean spotted an English raiding party attacking a nearby farmstead.
I will say, similar to the Norman campaign, this first mission is very much a narrative-driven experience, so I'm not going to be talking too much in this one, and there's not really a huge amount to actually showcase, because it is just a very, well, like, linear scenario. Like, there's not much creative freedom that you have in this scenario. It's just a case of do what we tell you. But I can you can rest assured that the campaign does open up after this, and we can showcase some interesting tactics, some corner cutting, I suppose.
The French knights defeated the English raiders, and Sir Guy de Rochefort joined Sir Jean's party. Looking to secure his honor, a young knight held his ground on a bridge in Sir Jean's path. Honorably conceding defeat in the duel, Sir Yves Charel joined the cause.
So I have played around with trying to split our characters up and do multiple objectives at once, but the game does not allow it.
Sir Jean's search next brought him to Sir Geoffroy Dubois, whose squires were contending with a detachment of English longbowmen. The knights would use the great speed of their war horses to charge the archers and overwhelm them. The English longbowmen fell, but the French knights knew the enemy would attempt to retake the hilltop fortification and steeled themselves for further attacks.
So yeah, this one's just to defend for a minute. The best thing about this mission, honestly, is the number of abilities that you have that you can kind of utilize in these fights, but other than that, yeah, it's a bit of a straightforward one, I'm afraid. Still, it is relatively short, so there is that. Alright, looks like we're on the final wave now. All these hero abilities really are pretty damn powerful. Like less damage, enemies have less armor, healing, speed. Just lovely it is.
With Sir Geoffroy by his side, Sir Jean had secured the outpost.
And it's just the old grand tournament to compete in. We'll be using cavalry and men-at-arms for the main mission, the main fight. The reason we're going with the men-at-arms and the cavalry is just because they're the most effective units against what the enemy are going to be fielding, which are going to be spearmen, man-at-arms, and German mercenaries.
Sir Jean entered the staging area for the tournament, where he prepared to choose which knights would join him in battle. Each knight would be accompanied by his squires, young nobles in training to become knights themselves. Sir Jean had selected his champions. As the sun rose, the two sides entered the arena, ready for the first round of combat.
Savets quoque nos advienne. Oye, vets vos donc, en avoué. Vectons nos en avoué.
Kind of want to just get on top of them right off the bat. Does help a lot. Otherwise, our cavalry take quite a lot of damage from the spearmen.
Claiming an easy victory in the first round, the French champions left the arena to recover their strength.
You also get to upgrade. Takes like 2 seconds. And we'll go back straight back to it.
Refreshed and reinvigorated, the French knights returned to the arena for another round of combat. The combat of the 30 was about to decide which nation would control the Duchy of Brittany.
A nice easy mission to start things off. Trust me, it gets harder.
Triumphant, Sir Jean de Beaumanoir and his loyal knights claimed victory. The combat of the 30 had decided control of Brittany in favor of the French. Little did the two sides know, this was just the beginning of a bitter war that would outlive them all. In the 100 Years' War, the English used a terror tactic, a raid through enemy territory, intended to intimidate and provoke the French into battle. It was called Chevauchee. The principal weapon for Chevauchee was fire. And one of the ways it was delivered was with incendiary arrows.
Challenge with incendiary arrows? Keeping them alight.
One type of incendiary arrow was fueled with gunpowder.
You've got charcoal, got sulfur, and we've got saltpeter. Saltpeter is the main ingredient. The more oxygen you put into it, the hotter it burns. Of course, when it's on an arrow, when it's being shot, you've got a turbocharged airstream.
The chemicals are bound together with brandy, left to dry, and poured into a linen bag. The extra long arrowhead is inserted into the bag and then tied off to secure it. It is then sealed by dipping it into boiling tree resin. This resin, which itself is highly flammable, provides a waterproof casing. It also shields the burning gunpowder so the wind doesn't put it out in flight.
Now that looks deadly, and I really want to shoot it.
The art to shooting an incendiary arrow is timing. Too early, and it will go out. Too late, it will spit at you like a dragon.
That was just evil. That was great.
The word chevauchee means horse raid, and it was mobile light horsemen who spearheaded the attacks. They took gold and silver from the churches, valuables from wealthy citizens, and as much food and drink as they could find from anyone. A chevauchee was scorched earth warfare to create discontent amongst the enemy's subjects, perhaps even to get them to turn against their king. An army on campaign needed a decisive battle. And a Chevauchee was intended to taunt the enemy to come out and fight. After victory at the Combat of the 30, the French faced devastating raids from England's Black Prince. But France's King John II was closing in. Jean finally caught the English near the city of Poitiers in September 1356. The French army outnumbered the English by thousands. King Jean himself joined the fight, but what seemed a certain victory for France soon turned into a nightmare. The English longbow devastated the mighty French army. An endless hail of arrows gutted the main French force. Then the English captured King Jean. The fight was over. The Battle of Poitiers was another catastrophic defeat for the French. The English had destroyed most of France's nobility in a single day. Now they turned their attention towards taking the French capital, Paris. The invaders marched unopposed towards Paris. The remains of some of the medieval walls of Paris still stand today. As the English army approached, the terrified locals sought shelter behind these defenses. Could France's capital withstand the full might of the Black Prince's army? The English Black Prince had raided the French countryside without mercy, and now his army had come for the capital. With the English on their doorstep, it fell to the French army and the people of Paris to defend the walls of their proud city.
Alrighty folks, this is just a straight up defense mission.
Hoping to avoid open battle, the French began fortifying the city, manning the walls and calling every available soldier to his post.
First thing we're going to be doing is pulling all the villagers outside of the city into the city. Honestly, the hard part's actually finding them. But yeah, let's...
As the French hastened their preparations, several detachments of English soldiers were spotted closing in on the city.
Alright, where are the others? We've got two of these here. Definitely want to grab this. Village there. Two more farmers there. There's another villager there.
The English showed no mercy, burning their way to Paris via 3 routes, each of which was home to villages and farms that supplied the capital.
Right, that should be all of the villagers heading towards Paris now, unless I've forgotten someone. Can't accept these two. Oh, and these two. Is that all of them? I think that might be. Hard, but honestly, he's finding them or remembering where they are. I need to be focusing quite heavily on the wood production. So wood and food are the main ones, honestly, at the start. We will be transitioning to gold as well. One of the things I do want to be doing is building a town centre as soon as I can. We do need a little bit stone for that, so we'll probably put a couple on stone production.
Having struck out at the English front line, the French had slowed the enemy's advance.
So to my knowledge, there is no way of ending this mission early. The only way of ending this mission is just by defending. And honestly, even slowing down the enemy just slows down the end of this this mission. So your best bet, honestly, is just to play this one out normally. Right, so we've actually got a fair amount of wood now. Just need a little bit of stone.
As the French continued to rally their army, the English took the last of the surrounding villages and had almost encircled Paris.
Well, that should give me enough to build a second town centre, which we will build here. We do want to be having two separate control groups, so we're working on that at the moment.
With the countryside in flames and the English at the city gates, the French armies steeled themselves for battle. Now came the capital's true test, with the mighty walls of Paris hold against a fearsome English siege. The Parisian Guard raised the alarm as the English began their first assault on the city walls.
So we're going to want to build another mill, at least one more. We need to get our food income because food is going to be quite a big requirement for us once we get our infrastructure fully rocking and rolling. So it's just what we're setting up now, just whilst we deal with these sieges. Focus down the ram because that's the one that's actually going to do the damage to the walls, and then we'll start setting up for the next attacks.
Valiantly, repelling the first English attack.
So actually destroying the these units that surround the base don't make any difference because ultimately they just keep rebuilding them. So it's better just not to bother, ironically. And we do want to get loads of mills. Mills are really what's going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. That's kind of misplaced. Needs to go 1 square to the... I guess wherever I place it's not quite going to work. Let's go there. So what we'll do is we'll have 2 control groups. This will be the second. So I'll move this over here. We're going to upgrade our units. So actually we got pretty good production at the moment, and good amount of money coming in. Food is looking pretty good. We should also be able to start upgrading stuff at some point. Seem to be a little bit low on gold is the only problem. There's another gold mine there we should be utilising, which we'll do that now. And we'll get some gold increased gather rate. We might have pushed out too far. I think this is a patrol actually. Move this over here. The Arbalists are definitely one of the better units in this for this faction. They're very, very good. They're like the equivalent. Well, not to say equivalent. They're like the French version of the longbow, but the longbow is just much better, unfortunately. But it is what it is. Actually, we don't need that at all. What was the... This is what we want. Increase the production speed. Okay, no idle villagers. We like that. Gonna preemptively move these over to this mine. Start getting some knights. Don't need stone. This is probably one we want to think about getting, especially the attack of all arrows. Right, food is starting to be a problem again. So first things first, let's build a lumber camp here. Okay, now we need to get some more food. So for some reason this isn't counted as a military building even though it builds military units. So you have to manually select it. It's just kind of a bit annoying, I suppose. Okay, we need to start pouring the guys over here now. And we definitely need to take down this trebuchet before it absolutely destroys my Gonna have to send some of these over here. Deal with this. Split these guys up. Okay, back it up. Okay, I've gone too far forward naturally.
The French defense of their capital held firm, wearing down the English invaders one by one.
Alright, we are now getting really good income, which is fantastic. So we can actually start building some more military buildings. So our macro can actually keep up. I'm actually going to put some more on wood as well. Lovely, lovely.
Besoigne à faire?
I'm going to take down these rams. As they breach our walls. Lovely, lovely. Okay, we are now basically out of gold, which is not ideal.
Oyez les ordonnances.
Tous te y a Laurette. Oyez tout le monde. Marchiez derrière moi, très toutes. Sur l'ouest paré. Une autre Versailles. Aldertan seulement. Ici les commandements. Attendez les grottes. Ici les commandements.
Move these back to here. We're actually maxed out on 200 supply, so we can't actually build anything new. What we can do is move these guys over here. Team 2 is already pretty damn big. Since we are max, we might as well push out a little bit. Managed to get in, that's annoying.
The enemy grew ever more desperate as their ranks thinned and their hopes of victory faded.
Problem is now we got no goals, we can't build our ballistas anymore. It's now limited to just the more basic unit types. Time to build some more racks.
Feici Novelsko.
Feici Lesko.
Dziwujesz de sester. Compagnon.
Acest met
Jobtenberg à vos appuis.
Avant. Compagnon.
Coming from the top side.
Soyez expressed, compagnon.
So let's deal with that.
Les autres laissent commandant.
Oil. Vestiaire de mouet.
Accesex. Senes Lidieux.
Although the walls of Paris had been breached, the French could still hold the city, so long as its mighty landmarks did not fall.
Les Chevaucheurs s'escouten! À l'arson, Chevaucheur! Un tête mettre was ouais, schon, Jobten, rest tous!
Alberestier. À pointe basse.
Rest tous sans presse! Bande, je commande! Avant! À l'arson, chevalier! Allons! La
Alberestron. Acest mesmos. Acest mesmos. Compagnon. Aux allons.
Right, food's actually pretty good. We can move some of these guys. We can build a stone wall gate.
Tous te y a là. Marchiez arrière moi, très tous. Oh, yes, tout le monde. Lors se bâtit, je s'estuie. Oh, jetzt bien.
Access Metzvos, compagnon!
Je gagne.
Voyez, l'heure est de besogne.
Mostly just keeping an eye out which way they're going to go next.
Soyez expressed, compagnon!
Okay, this way. Cool.
Les commandements.
L'ennemi notre
Chevalier! Tempest! Rest! À l'arson, chevalier!
That's a lot of battering rams.
Chevalier! Je suis votre service!
Jets mesmos habillement. Alberestier. Comme il vous plaise. Bien oeil. Acest mesmos. Alberestron.
Service und Ordonnance!
Alberestron. Acest mesmos. Comme il vous plaise. Alberestier.
We're definitely lacking a lot of like men at arms. Is what we really kind of want.
Acest mesmos. Alberestron.
Orches Metzvos, compagnon! Votre jetzt pose à moi.
Alberestier.
Orches Metzvos, compagnon!
Allez, soyez besoin. Ouais. Y vais donc.
Service Orches Metzvos! Nous allons! Rest tous avertisez! Anderson, chevalier!
Right, pop cap again.
Votre jetzt vos à moi! Chevalier incontinent!
Sur quoi me faut?
Chevalier pour votre compagnon! Onyx, Senes Lidieux! Sans avant, compagnon!
Oh, I think this is the last wave actually. Oh, ideal. GG's.
Defeated and demoralized by the strength of the French defense, the Black Prince's army abandoned their siege of the capital. Paris celebrated victory, but this was not the last test the French would face in their struggle to win the war. The battlefields of the 100 Years' War were full of danger. To defend against these weapons, a new type of armor was developed: plate armor.
Plate armor clad the knight in an articulating exoskeleton of hardened steel. A hard outer shell that still flexes and moves with the body.
It provided impressive protection and was an extraordinary technological achievement.
Now, one of the ways that armor gets its strength is through shape. Both of these pieces are made out the exact same thickness as steel, but I can show you there's one stronger than the other. Here's the one with no shape. You see it buckles immediately. If I swap it for one that's been forged to have strength and shape, you can see it's much stronger. It's going nowhere.
It wasn't just the shape that gave it strength. It was also how the metal was treated by the armorer.
Now, the benefits of using heat is it obviously makes the piece more plastic, more ductile, lets me shape it. But the fuel also adds layers of carbon into the outer surface. This helps me increase the hardness and strength of the material.
The art of the armorer was being able to judge the temperature of the metal by eye, managing the heat to create resilience in the metal. The combination of heat-treated metal and rigid shapes meant that armor didn't need to be so thick and heavy, making it much easier to fight in. But good quality plate armor did have its downside. It was very expensive.
Now, not everyone could afford full steel plate armor. For the common man, there is the brigandine. Now, these are made up of overlapping steel plates that are then riveted through a textile outer. This gives you a much bigger range of movement, but is limited and is not as strong as a full steel breastplate. That said, it is much cheaper and much easier to maintain.
At its best, the armored knight was invincible. But armor didn't just provide defense. It was also a weapon and an expression of a knight's power and prestige. Armor transformed its wearer into a work of art. The walls of Paris held out against the English onslaught. England's King Edward and the Black Prince abandoned the siege. They marched towards Chartres to try their luck at conquering a less formidable target. But before they could attack, a violent storm hit the army. Killing 1,000 English soldiers in a tempest of hail and freezing winds. To Edward, this Black Monday disaster seemed like divine retribution. A sign that it was time to stop waging war and make peace with France's King Jean. But even as peace between kings was reached, the people of France were still living in bloodshed and turmoil. Between 1358 and 1370, France was in chaos. Peasant uprisings, rampaging bands of mercenaries, and civil war ravaged the country. Peasants rose in rebellion, killing their lords and wreaking havoc. Mercenary bands also roamed the land. Known as routiers, they had once been hired by the English to fight against the French, but were cut loose when peace was reached. They systematically ravaged and pillaged towns across France. And with King Jean prisoner in England, his son Charles the Dauphin faced homegrown attacks on his rule by powerful French lords, beset from all sides. The Dauphin's forces had to regain control over their own country. Having only recently been crowned King of France, Charles V dispatched his army to the French-held village of Évreux to forge order from chaos. From here, the army would move to extinguish three major threats. Bands of roving mercenaries harrying the countryside, a peasant uprising, and attacks from a rival for the French crown, Charles of Navarre.
This is actually quite a fun mission, to be fair. I do like this one.
The French army would start by reclaiming the rebel-held villages of Cocherel, Jouy, and Croissy.
Quito. Vado labu, sì, comprendo. Io
Si somes. Io ma sono la cose.
Mandesquede. Parat, sì, bene. Felice et beate. Cose sera ma sonata. Parat pour lavora.
In aiuto!
So there's a couple of things you want to do. Obviously put out the fires being the first thing. But we also want to
Ici va toast.
focus on conquering these little outlying villages.
In taking the village of Jouy, the French army was closer to stemming the peasant rebellion and regaining control.
And I'm going to try and conquer this town as well. Okay, we do need to deal with the routiers. And we also need to start getting some wood production.
The village of Croissy, rich in gold deposits, was a crucial town for the French to reclaim.
Wood needed.
As the French army struggled to regain control of the countryside, they were struck by a band of English routiers. These mercenaries had been cut loose by the English army and were plundering the countryside in order to make a living.
Okay, that gives us gold income. Now we can deal with the routier.
The French army defeated the rebels at Croissy and took control of the gold-rich village. The central monastery town of Cocherel was still under the control of rebel peasants. The French army would have to take it before they could launch an assault on Charles of Navarre. The French forces eliminated the routier attack, but more were still raiding the countryside in search of provisions and riches. The routier demanded payment from the French, or they would continue their horrifying raids.
So for the next few moments, we're just going to be focusing very heavily on getting our economy up and running properly. Wood and food seem to be the two biggest problems. Wood specifically is the biggest issue right now, but we do also need to consider that food is going to be a problem once our infrastructure is online. Alright, so we do need to take this village as well.
The French discovered the routier hidden camp and could put an end to the English raids if they could destroy the camp.
Attention, est facile, cavalier. Traite, c'était l'ennemi. Equite sunt fanatos.
La bourse Pérance.
Equite attendent ici.
Cursor obéia. Commandes.
El linea equites.
Well, since the enemy isn't reacting to us taking down their defences, then happy days. We'll just continue to take down the towers. Easy peasy.
Io ma sono la cause.
Parate equites.
Sagitta in arco.
Mande Marcy, bene.
Another barracks.
Cose sera ma sonata.
Ouais, nessun qui ties, colones. C'est qui est, colones? Parate, archer. Quemandes. Odite. Parate, venies, serviente. Ouais, parate, obedio. Ambulance.
Try and draw these guys out of the town.
Parate. Audience. Archer, parate. Momentesi, archer. Intendo.
Capturing this town actually puts us up to Castle Age as well, which is really good.
Venies, servientes.
So the Routiers to deal with on this side.
Colonne, movi colones. Vado laburar.
Meanwhile, keep building up our production.
Parat por movo. Vado laburar. Momentesi archer.
So we'll be building more production from here anyway, and we'll be actually obtaining it once we actually capture the city. So I'm not too overly fussed about production right now, because it will just be naturally be getting better.
Seco materia. Io ma sono.
Parates servientes. Ambulance.
Okay, there should be more than what we need now to deal with the Routiers. And once we've dealt with the Routiers, we can then group up with the main army.
The French army took control of the rebel villages, and the peasant uprising was subdued.
So I'm going to use these monks to capture these. Also
But to
grab
keep control over the region, they would need to defend its centre of influence, the monastery at Cocherel. Northeast of Cocherel, Charles of Navarre's army had established a fortified camp. The King of Navarre sought to make himself ruler of France as well. He intended to press his claim by destroying the newly arrived royal forces.
Okay, we can now get some more upgrades.
Oyez, venez-vous, et c'est des Spartans.
Okay, we definitely need more peasants to build more, like, bases. Fantastic. These guys, so we can start upgrading some stuff. Don't know why the mine's so far away. So hopefully we can get our flaming arrows upgrade soon.
ordonnances. Lors batiges s'estuient.
Besoin à faire?
Feici les Jetsmes vos habillement, Arbelestier.
Doesn't like that. Take that out.
Oyet, Veit, Jambert. Oyet, Arbelestier. La Jets compagnon, aux allants.
Bonne besoin de fait.
Quoi faut-il faire?
Yeah, I think that's the routier pretty much taken care of. We just need to deal with the big army now. Wrong army. Deal with that one. Team 2 can take this. Oh. It's unfortunate. We've still not got a fire arrow. What does it take to research?
Ils sont disconfits! Quench the gun! Albenestre, à Chespesvot!
Manuel Rassou.
Oyez Sivey! Annonce, compagnon, à Chespesvot! Ici les compagnons! Bien, ça compagnon! Albenestre, à Chespesvot!
Okay, at this point we might as well put everyone over here.
Ça est bel Manuel.
Dicte-moi ma besoin.
Albenestre, Chespesvot habillement, Albelestier! Albenestre, porteur!
Pour une sanglante intrigue.
Longtemps va-t-il demeurer?
Gold is still a bit of a problem.
Oyez bien, compagnon! Albelestier, à point de basse!
Où est mon Versailles? Archière.
Routier's dealt with.
With the routier camp destroyed, mercenary attacks were no longer a threat.
Ici, oyez bien, compagnon. Alors, ici, à coup de 13 votre engines, avance!
Once you combine these armies, that should be more than enough. We're actually maxed, like proper maxed.
Giovanni Bastir.
Access vos, compagnon. Compagnon. Ici, les commandements. Oyez bien, compagnon.
Got all the upgrades as well that we need. This is still going to be a relatively challenging fight, but to be fair, being maxed, I think we'll be absolutely fine. They do have the high ground though, and a lot of archers, or longbowmen, I should say.
Pushing up the hillside, the French discovered Charles of Navarre's camp. His front line had the high ground and was made up entirely of archers. The French would have to think carefully about how to approach the stronghold.
Probably want to be a little bit careful because we don't have the most tanky army right now. And it's all the arbalists that are doing all the damage.
Retake force. Ici les commandements. Adjustment force. Compagnon, prêt. Envoyez de pièces. Compagnon. Adjustment force. Avion. Envolette. Compagnon. Alors, adjustment. Je gagne mon gauge.
Want to deal with that? Oops. Lovely jubbly. Good mission, that. I like that one.
The French army had repelled Charles of Navarre, stemmed the revolt, and held back the raids of the Routiers. In the struggle for control over France's lands, the king still clung to power. A warhorse was no ordinary horse. In battle, it was a knight's comrade in arms. By nature, horses are prey animals, but the warhorse had to become a predator. They had to be aggressive and fearless, to charge enemy lines and to trample anyone in their way. To achieve this, they were specially bred and highly trained to fight, to lash out with their hooves on command. This meant war horses were expensive and so conveyed high status.
War horses were incredibly strong and powerful, but they were also vulnerable. This is a really big target, and it's much easier to shoot a horse than it is to hit its rider. So just as men wore armor, horses wore armor too.
A knight didn't ride his warhorse on the road to battle. It was far too valuable. Instead, they were led by the knight's groom. A knight would take multiple war horses on campaign, as he would need to change to a fresh horse several times during battle. Once geared up, the knight, his horse, and his weapons became a highly effective system.
The heavy cavalry lance had a small ring called a graper, and this locks into my arm, forming a hard linkage, so that the lance can't shoot backwards on impact.
The war saddle was also crucial. With its high back, it locked the rider to the horse.
This means with the graper and the saddle, horse, man, and weapon are all locked together to create one giant horse-powered projectile.
The main purpose of heavy cavalry was to charge straight into the enemy and smash through their lines. The impact charge crashed into an enemy with terrifying force. It required horses with exceptional courage and power. With rebels and raiders eliminated at Cocherel, King Charles V faced one last threat to France: the relentless English invaders. Word arrived that the English army was weak and scattered, divided by infighting. The king quickly directed his army to chase down the old enemy of France at Pontvallain. The French town of Pontvallain lay directly in the path of marauding English soldiers on the hunt for loot. The town's only hope of survival lay with the French forces camped nearby. The French quickly prepared to ambush the disorganized English raiders and defend Pontvallain from ruin.
So this one too is actually a largely defensive mission.
Colonnes requiem mondement.
So we are going to try and defeat the main English army before the timer hits 0. That's kind of like my own personal challenge. It's definitely doable. Whether we'll do it or not, it's another story. And grab the wheelbarrow. We're going to take out the routiers, which are camped over here.
The main English army thundered into the valley. They paused to rest beyond the town before launching their raid.
So yeah, that's the army we need to defeat, basically. However we choose to do that. It is easier just to defend, honestly.
A small bandit camp lurked in the valley. If the French could defeat these routiers, they could claim the supplies they had gathered.
Main reason being just because they split their forces. Get a second town centre. So what about just getting our economy up as fast as possible so that we can start powering units out?
Parats pour la bourrard. Secco materia. Parate, archer! L'inquiétude au vado! Si, citon, proxime! Preparo medio!
And the other benefit of taking out that routier camp is that we can utilise the gold mine that's there, as that is the only source of gold, really, outside of the marketplace. But yeah, we are going to power into Castle Age as soon as possible, really. That's kind of like the goal right now.
Mauvais colonnes. Retournons comme materia. Parats pour venir.
In fact, we probably don't really need any troops right now, to be honest.
Quedme. Six sommes. Arquier parat. Vado labura. Parats pour la bourrard.
Felice et beate.
Près de la bourre.
Yep, we're going to nuke as much gold as possible, because we are going to need to do a lot of upgrading. And we do want quite a lot of arbit... Yes, the arbalists. I'm just going to go with arbalists.
The first group of English raiders began their attacks on the outlying farms. After destroying the farms, they would attack the town of Pontvallain.
So we're nicely in their path.
Escolte bene. Cose sera ma sonata.
Six sommes. Quedme. Moment desi archer.
Mandesqued. Six sommes. Vado labura.
Mandesqued labour. Odite.
Parats pour labura. Buon labour. Qued me. Qued labour. Cose sera ma sonata. Et chili mandement. Labour felice et beat. Parat por venir. Io ma sono la cose.
Don't have any use for stone this mission.
Hans. Quel, me, et ci mandement. Contento. Si sommes. Vado laburar. Parats pour laburar.
Ascolte bene. Et Chelsea, bene.
At this point, I'm actually going to send quite a lot of villagers up here because this is where I'm going to basically build our camp.
Parats pour venir. Cause sera ma sonate.
Well, forward base, I should say.
Laborans en les mans. Toutes audite. Comme me.
So I'm going to go for this one. I'm going to put it here.
Vado laburar.
Toutes audite.
Si.
Vado laburar.
Vale.
Toutes audito.
Bene.
Io ma sono la cose. Quel.
I'm going to camp closer to these guys.
Parates, servientes.
You also need to get prepared for the next attack, which I believe is down south.
Parate. Cavalario, parat.
Escorte.
Labour Spérance.
Languier parat. Arquier parat.
Parats pour venir.
Quel Mendes. Quel Labour.
Increase armorable non-siege units. Will come in very handy.
Pour laburar.
Mendes.
Parates, servientes.
Parate.
Attention. En common course.
So we're basically trying to build an army big enough to take all this out. The big problem is the longbowmen and the early men-at-arms.
More scattered English raiders arrived and made their way towards Pontvallain.
Labour Spérat. Laburar Longdi.
Vale. Que mandes.
Audite, servientes. Sito.
Audite.
Bene audite. Ite. Audite, servientes. Odio.
In ayuda!
Parat.
Ayez scur.
Obéis au commandement.
Faites. Jeunesse Legion. Si besoin. Les chevaliers avions moins.
Oyez les ordonnances.
Right, let's power up specifically archers. A bunch of barracks.
Obeleste paré.
Giovanni Basti.
Compagnon.
Dictez-moi une Versailles.
The next attack will be here.
Avant. À mon commandement.
Oyez, veici.
Si obéis à vos
So
commandements.
that's where we're going to focus our attention next. Okay, we'll increase speed at which we produce units.
Les autres, les commandements.
Acces metzvas.
J'obtempère à vos advices. Ainsi soit-il. Attendez les compagnons. Voyez bien. Asseyez vos armées. Nous allons.
Dictez-moi une Versailles.
On me fa au train. Advertence, tout le monde.
Okay, we're going to be using excess food to create gold because we are basically out of gold production now.
Laissez-moi exploiter.
Baillez-moi besoin.
Lance devance nos salaires. Leur bâtisse s'essuie.
Obéir. Access vos, compagnons.
Une autre Versailles. Dictez-moi une Versailles. Manuel Assouvi. Belle œuvre.
Manance, offrance.
Oh, yes.
Lors devance nos salaires.
Let's build an arsenal, which will give us some more upgrades.
L'heure est de besoin. Soyez prest. Comme je suis votre serveux.
Compagnon, fais ici la...
Avant, compagnon.
Dictez-moi vos commandements. 16 belles manouères.
Oyez, tout le monde. Tous dialogues.
More scattered English raiders arrived and made their way towards Pontvallain.
Ça est belle manouère. Besoin.
Soyez prest, compagnon. Access vos, compagnon. Certes.
Oyez bien. Ici, laisse commandement.
We should have no problem dealing with this lot, to be fair.
Tous sommes prêts.
In fact, at this point, we might actually have what we need just to push through. They have got a lot, but they haven't got that much.
Compagnon, ayez bien.
Access vos, nous allons. Attendez les commandements.
And we've got, what, 74 troops? Should possibly be enough. We need to take down these knights, though. Target fire these down. Yeah, no, that should be all she wrote, actually. Of course, the men are a bit of a problem, and they still got a lot of long men at arms, but yeah, we got enough. With the reinforcements as well, more than enough. Arbalists really are just insanely good. GG's, boys.
After a hard-won battle against a scattered enemy, the French succeeded in halting the English Chevauchee at Pontvallain. The English army was not invincible. The French cause was not yet lost. Longbows were powerful weapons, but keeping archers supplied with ammunition was a major undertaking.
This is a modern arrow. Small and lightweight. Pretty much what everyone shoots these days. Compared to this, medieval war arrow. Look at the size of this thing. It's a beast.
A medieval army might need more than 1 million war arrows on campaign, and each one had to be made by hand. It was a labor-intensive business, and the person who did it was called a fletcher. First, a log is split into square staves. Then the fletcher uses a plane to start roughing out the shape.
Ugh, how do I get it round?
Not only have you got to make it round, you've got to make it bobtailed. Look at that.
Bobtailed?
You see that's coming down thinner down that end? There's a natural taper coming down there to that end.
A plane with a curved blade is used to create the taper. This makes the arrow aerodynamic.
This is an incredibly painstaking process for one arrow.
Most of them are just for one shot as well.
Next, a slot is cut to receive a piece of horn. The horn reinforces the nock. That's the notch that fits the arrow to the bowstring. Without the horn insert, the power of a heavy warbow could split and shatter an arrow. Once the horn is in place, the nock is sawn and shaped. Then the fletcher has to attach the feathers to the shaft.
Now what you've got to do is you've got to get rid of the stiffness of the quill. You're going to work it down so it's nice and thin.
So this is dogfish skin?
Yeah, medieval sandpaper.
The feathers are glued in place and then secured with thread. The final process is to arm the arrow with its arrowhead. The person who makes these is called an arrowsmith. From a blank piece of iron, he starts with the part that fits over the arrow shaft. First, he makes the bar flat, then uses a special former to create a socket. The final stage is to hammer out the shape of the head. Arrow stocks had to be prepared far in advance of a campaign. It was impossible to make them in sufficient numbers overnight. A medieval war arrow like this could only be shot from a big, exceptionally powerful bow. And it packed a mighty punch. The French won an overwhelming victory at the Battle of Pontvallain. It was the first time the English had been utterly defeated during the war. But the triumph was short-lived. As England spent the next 60 years amassing French territory through alliances and victories at great battles, such as Agincourt. It seemed that nothing could stop England. Who then could have foreseen that a teenaged girl was about to change the course of history? In 1429, France was in dire straits. Nowhere was it more evident than the besieged city of Orleans. The city was completely surrounded by English-held forts. But just a few days' ride away, here in Chinon, there was potential help. The French royal prince, the Dauphin Charles, was holed up in his fortress and under pressure to ride out to save Orleans. As Charles hesitated, a young peasant girl arrived at his court. Her name was Jeanne d'Arc. She claimed to have received saintly visions, giving her a divine task to help Charles become king and drive the English out of France forever. Charles was skeptical, but was soon convinced of her divinity. And he charged this 17-year-old with the near impossible mission to liberate Orleans. To Jeanne, this was the first step in realizing her God-given destiny. In April 1429, she rode out from Chinon at the head of her army to confront the hated enemy of France. Surrounded by English strongholds, and with its last line of defense under attack, the city of Orléans grew ever more desperate. In France's darkest hour, 17-year-old Jeanne d'Arc arrived with the king's army to liberate a city and prevent the fall of a nation.
This is an interesting mission and a cool one. One that we can take advantage of a very specific wind condition, which is what we will be doing. Okay, grab these. Okay, we're mostly going to be focusing on the production of Royal Knights.
Laissez-moi exploiter. Avertan seulement.
Oyez les commandements. Oyez les ordonnances.
All right.
The English had captured the vital fortification known as Les Tourelles on the south bank of the Loire. Orléans would live or die on its access to supplies. Recapturing Les Tourelles would be key to saving the city. The main bridge leading to Orléans had been destroyed by the French to prevent an English onslaught. Jeanne d'Arc had to find another way to cross to the south bank and make her assault on Les Tourelles.
So what we're going to be doing here is utilizing the fact that Jeanne d'Arc has a heal ability, and the fact that Royal Knights are actually insanely good. The main objective is actually just to destroy this one fort. That is all we have to do to win this mission. So we're actually going to be building a couple of mangonels to help us do that. And we're taking the obelisk that we can deal with the enemies on the fort, on the walls, basically. So we're going to be setting up shop.
Soyez je face vos commandements. Commande perfect à l'arson.
So we need extra gold, which we can do by selling food
Les
and wood.
Tourelles was the linchpin in the English siege of Orléans, blocking the main supply route to the city. If Jeanne d'Arc could capture it, Orléans would finally be liberated.
So we're just going to be holding fire for just a second.
Having suffered under the English siege for months, Orléans had sent for crucial supplies, but English patrols threatened their arrival at the city. If Orléans hoped to receive the supplies, the French would have to clear the road of English raiders.
Alright, so the first thing we want to do is focus on the gate, and then when the enemies charge through the gate, we'll try and take them out. And then we're also going to be using the arbalists to focus fire on the archers on the wall. All the while utilising Jeanne d'Arc's healing ability. And obviously the mangonels as well. So yeah. Moving to incendiary arrows, they tend to do a little bit more damage. But I don't think it actually makes any difference to the time it takes to take down these walls. But plus they look cooler, I suppose, so there is that.
Mangonels assis. Reste tout. Oyez. Or attendons ordonnance. Faust, Paul Droyette, Iseul.
That should be pretty much all she wrote, really. We're going to pop a heal. Deal with these guys. Use Team 2 to deal with the enemy archers. And that's all she wrote. GG's, boys. Nice easy way to deal with this mission.
The King's army drove the hated enemy of France from Les Tourelles. With the main road to the city back in French hands, the English abandoned their long siege of Orléans. Celebrating a momentous victory at the head of the French army, Jeanne d'Arc would forever be remembered as the Maid of Orléans. A medieval army on the march was a city on the move. No expense was spared to keep knights and nobles in the lap of luxury.
Knights lived in luxurious tents called pavilions, which had all of their furnishing, proper chairs and tables and tableware, real beds with fine linens, even wall hangings.
All this furniture had to be transported, and that's on top of what was needed for combat. Weapons and armor needed an army of artisans to maintain them.
The armourer's job on campaign was one of maintenance, constantly repairing, knocking out dents, simply changing straps, or replacing rivets that had broken. If you think of the knight as a race car driver, the armourer is his chief mechanic. Without him, he would not be able to function.
Also following an army was a band of opportunistic civilians, the camp followers. All vying to sell their services and goods to the soldiers. When on the march, most of the thousands of soldiers were mounted. Each knight would have at least 6 horses, all needing grooms, farriers, and fodder.
The royal household brought with them their clerks, their priests, essential for men who feared they might die in battle, and of course, their cooks.
The common soldier subsisted mainly on bread and a thick soup called pottage. It was an altogether different story for the knights.
A knight on campaign would expect the best food, so we have game, we have fine meats, we have fruit when it's in season, always cooked, because food is tied in with health as well. That's very important. And I'm just finishing off a dish here of spiced meatballs with a red wine and pine nut sauce.
French and English armies could be on campaign for months on end, maneuvering and skirmishing until they took to the field for a decisive battle. Jeanne d'Arc had liberated Orléans and put the English army to flight. However, as the English retreated, they became an obstacle for Charles the Dauphin. He needed a clear path from Chinon to Reims, where he would be crowned king. Nearing the town of Patay, the English sought to regroup. But Jeanne d'Arc and her French army were closing in. Fleeing the Loire Valley, the English were on the run. As they retreated northwards, a French vanguard was in close pursuit.
Credit where credit's due, this is a really fun mission.
Caught out of position, the French faced a surprise attack from the English rearguard. A detachment of English archers blocked the road with palings, an effective measure against cavalry. The French vanguard had to clear the road if they were to call in reinforcements.
This is a great mission. I love the fact that this is like another one of these missions where we basically just grab gold and that's how we call in reinforcements.
Hearing the rallying cry of the English coming from the village of St. Sigmund, the French were alerted to the enemy position.
So whilst there are other options, the French Royal Knights are so good, and that's pretty much all we'll be using this entire mission.
With the road cleared, the French army could safely bring in reinforcements from nearby allies. The French army paid their ally and received a detachment of reinforcements.
In so many ways, Knights are the best. Just they don't die very easily. They're insane charge bonus. To be honest, a lot of their counters aren't really that great counters. Like spearmen are supposed to like counter cavalry, but man, Knights kind of kill spearmen. So.
The French recaptured St. Sigmund and prepared to rendezvous with Jeanne d'Arc. But a large English detachment had set up a blockade. So long as that force was in place, the French vanguard could not reach Jeanne.
They're also extremely fast, and speed is a benefit to this mission. Yeah, just getting loads of knights is actually definitely just the most effective way of doing this mission.
With the English blockade destroyed, the French vanguard rejoiced at the arrival of Jeanne d'Arc and her troops. With their rearguard eliminated, the remaining English forces would now seek to escape the valley through the town of Patay. 3 enemy regiments were converging on the town along 3 main roads. Jean had either to stop the regiments on the roads or race ahead to fortify Patay itself.
So, best way of dealing with this is probably just to send Jeanne d'Arc on. And split the units up. So what we can do is we can send Jeanne d'Arc and her army down here and take on the 3rd road, and everyone else just deals with the middle road.
As the forces of the valiant Jeanne d'Arc entered the town, the people of Patay rallied to her cause.
We're taking this on.
The French army saw a chance to bolster their numbers and sent payment to their ally in return for reinforcements.
Right, just the last army to take on now.
Sending gold to their ally, the French army received fresh reinforcements.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all she wrote.
After an intense pursuit and a hard-fought battle, the French crushed the remaining English army, thwarting their desperate retreat. Now the triumphant Jeanne d'Arc could safely lead Charles to Reims for his coronation as King of France. Medieval soldiers suffered brutal injuries in battle. Their chance of survival lay with barber surgeons. From cutting hair to removing limbs on the battlefield, the job of a barber surgeon was varied, and so were their tools.
600 years ago, surgery was very different from today, and this is some of the kit that the surgeons of then would be using. For example, amputations. This bit of kit was used to cut through the skin. Then you need to get through bone, and this is what they used. Believe it or not, this was used for neurosurgery. But what they didn't have at the time was anesthesia.
Despite carrying out major surgery, barber surgeons had no formal training.
What they learned on the job, and the place where they practiced the most was the battlefield.
This was also a time when new surgical techniques were developed, particularly when it came to saving the life of a future king. In 1403, 16-year-old Prince Henry was injured in the Battle of Shrewsbury while fighting rebels trying to overthrow his father, King Henry IV.
The arrow penetrated his right cheek and became lodged at the base of his skull. He was very lucky it didn't kill him instantly.
Prince Henry pulled the arrow from his face. The shaft came out, but the arrowhead remained lodged inside.
They needed to get that out before infection set in and killed him.
To the rescue, celebrated surgeon John Bradmore. Bradmore recorded what he did to save the prince's life, including a picture of the tool he made to extract the arrowhead.
And it works by ensuring that the tip is closed and then inserting it along the track caused by the arrowhead until it meets the arrowhead.
Then the screw is turned to expand the tip, locking it in place inside the arrowhead.
And then ever so slowly and gently, you extract, making sure that you don't lose it along the way. I'm amazed by the skill that would have been needed to do this successfully. Can you imagine how good that felt when that came out?
The young prince survived to become King Henry V, hero of Agincourt. But perhaps the real heroes of medieval medicine were the barber surgeons, who saved countless lives on the battlefield. The Battle of Patay was a disaster for the English. The French wiped out their bowmen and drove their forces from the Loire Valley. Now for Jeanne d'Arc and the Dauphin, the way to Reims was clear. The Maid of Orleans rode with the Dauphin through the streets and was at his side when he was finally crowned King Charles VII of France. But less than 2 years later, Jeanne was captured in battle, sold to the English, and put on trial for heresy. She spent 6 months locked in a dungeon, awaiting her fate. King Charles, who owed his crown to Jeanne, did nothing to help win her freedom. She was found guilty. On May 30th, 1431, Jeanne d'Arc was brought here, to the old market square in Rouen, where she was burned at the stake. She was 19 years old. But what the Maid of Orleans started could not be denied. Her victories were the first in a chain of successes for France's military. Liberty was within reach. Thanks to the leadership of two brothers, Jean and Gaspard Bureau, the French army became experts in the use of artillery, transforming it into a disciplined, modern fighting force. In 1448, King Charles was ready to make a major move against the English. He vowed to retake Normandy. King Charles VII's army would soon have access to the most advanced artillery in Europe, thanks to the master gunners, the Bureau brothers. While the brothers developed their weapons, the king laid plans for their use. He would bring Normandy back under French control.
This is a great mission. I like this one.
The first phase of the king's plan would give the Bureau brothers time to perfect their cannons. He tasked his army with claiming a base of operations. With the town under French control, the Bureau brothers now had the use of the university and of their own siege workshop. Their next goal was to learn all they could about recent innovations in the mixing of the most potent gunpowder. While the army waited for their new weapons, they kept a watchful eye for any English attacks on the town.
Manance preste à heurer.
Alright, so we're going to split our troops up to maximise the opportunities that are available to us. We're also going to be taking full advantage of the fact that we start with a lot of resources by building our forces up preemptively.
With the mine under French control, the Bureau brothers had access to an abundance of iron for their gun barrels. The brothers worked tirelessly to cast their gun barrels, but they still needed insight into the latest gunpowder chemistry. With the skirmish won, trade could begin with the settlement.
Où dois-je traire ce carré?
J'obéirai. J'en ferai-je comme est advisé. Obéir est
And then getting back over here.
Fait, compagnon. Avant et sans mêler.
Nos balles sont prêtes.
So a trade route that increases our artillery unit production speed. Mine reduces the costs of buying siege units.
Les arbalèstes sont à cette espèce. Je fais comme il vous plaît.
tout suit à votre plaisir.
Okay, you can do this.
Je vais plus que le pas. Je vieillis. Je traite. Un autre ennemi embranché. Nos carènes sont prêts. Il nous faut marcher.
Okay, we've done what we need to here. So then we can go up there. Upgrade that, that. Just grab a few more of these. Definitely want that. Okay, it's definitely worth putting at least these on here just to get the extra bit of stone that we need.
Votre vouloir guidera.
Causez-vous. Soudain.
Just so we can upgrade to royal royal siege weapons.
Advertence, nous avons un port.
In the meantime, we're going to build
Je prends cure de ce manoir.
a bunch of military buildings. One thing I really like about this game is the fact that you can pre-group buildings that haven't actually been built yet. They've just been placed down, which is super useful. Great, so you've done that. So you can now pick up the relic and go back. I think it was this one. You can go ahead and sort that one out.
J'y pourrai. Abattons nos ennemis. Je fais votre commandement. Arbalétrier, criez bas. Arbalétrier, soyez nous
Alright, it's the full army
The
together.
Bureau brothers had successfully combined a powerful gunpowder recipe with sturdy cast iron gun barrels. At last, cannon production could begin. While the brothers turned out their cannons, culverins, and riboldequins, the French army would bolster themselves for the coming fight.
Okay, there we go. So I want royal cannons. And I want ideally around 4, but 3 will be enough.
Ainsi soit-il fait. Ce sera pour moi honneur. Ainsi soit-il fait. Je vous obéis. Qu'ainsi il soit. L'ennemi sera vaincu et mat. Nous attendons vos commandements. Soudain, au bruit pour la bataille. Victoire. S'ils sont tous des...
De mon œuvre.
Fait, compagnon. Si les commandements.
Point de... J'attends ma besogne prochaine.
Le champ nous attend. Juste est notre cause, chevalier. J'enseigne l'ennemi à me craindre. Nous attendons vos commandements.
Que sont les commandements? Advise pour votre engin.
Juste est notre cause, chevalier.
Extra damage is always good.
Arbalétrier, criez bas.
J'obéirai.
Le champ nous attend. Qui veille après moi?
Je fais comme il vous plaise. Bien, j'y vais brillamment.
Nous actons avant! Un seul arrière-garde!
Ne vous accordez point!
Justez notre cause, chevalier!
Advise pour votre engin. Tout est ordonné.
Fantastic. Cannons starting to be produced. Happy days.
Mais ici, les commandements. S'il aura bien moult de crever.
Le champ nous attend!
Les engins de siège sont prêts. Soudain. Mais ici, de...
Soyez, voyez bien!
Engins, nos accomplis sont vos...
C'est à
Les
vous
engins
d'exécuter votre advertise!
At last, the French artillery weapons were ready for deployment. After years of preparation, the time had come for Charles VII to make his move. To take back Normandy, he would need to recapture the stronghold of Rouen, a critical fortress from which the English had been attacking Paris. Rouen walls would face an explosive trial against the mighty force of gunpowder.
Yeah, well, gunpowder was the absolute game changer. Walls don't stand much of a chance, unfortunately, for them.
Les engins de... Soudain. Paix, soudain.
Voyez bien les commandements! Nous avons! Cuidez au butin!
The French army bore down on the formidable walls of Rouen, ready to launch their final assault on this key English stronghold.
C'est à honneur. Ce sera pour moi honneur.
Paix, compagnons. Ici, les commandements. J'aille et j'obtempère. Et pour moi, tout actif.
Yeah, that should take out one of their archers.
Nous attendons, c'est comme vous voulez.
Les soldats! Les coustiliers sont prêts! Nos destriers rongent leur frein!
Engins de siège assis. Oui, la barmain.
La victoire à ceux qui apportent bien.
Boom, baby.
Rouen's walls were breached. The French army had at last exposed the heart of the fortress.
Les coustiliers sont prêts! Nos destriers rongent leur
Having lost the walls of Rouen, the English made a last stand to hold the city. The French would need to destroy the buildings that had housed the English army and drive out the enemy for good.
Engins de siège assis.
Nous allons avoir des commandements! Les coustiliers! Nous allons avoir un
Je fais comme
le champ!
Les engins de siège sont prêts. Tout est ordonné.
Oyez les commandements, soudain!
C'est quasi... Les engins se meurent.
Soudain!
Les engins de siège sont...
Nous attendons votre saint soit-il fait!
Engins de...
Justez notre cause, chevalier! Les commandements vieux! Retire votre
Soudain. Voyons
Les engins de siège sont prêts.
Le champ nous attend!
Engins...
Juste là!
Les engins se meurent.
Prêt! Sur pour la bataille!
Engins de siège assis.
Le champ nous attend!
Well, we are well and truly in the heart of Rouen now. And Rouen is about to be turned to ruin. Once we plough through these 3 landmarks, ain't gonna be nothing left to stop us.
Nous actons! Ils vont bâtir! Soudain! Envoyez pour la bataille! Nous allons avoir des commandements! Nous attendons vos commandements! Les commandements assestés nous envoient! Avant! Le champ nous attend! Ce sera pour moi honneur! Justez notre cause!
GG's, boys.
un autre ennemi embroché.
With the English scattered and their buildings in ashes, the French had recaptured the critical fortress of Rouen. Charles VII had proven that France was no longer the underdog in the 100 Years' War. After decades of bloody dispute, Normandy was finally back in French hands. During the 14th century, the face of war in Europe changed forever. Thanks to a substance invented by the Chinese while searching for the elixir of life: gunpowder. One of the first guns used on the battlefields of Europe was this, the bombard.
This is a large stone-throwing gun for moving big projectiles like this up and over and through castle walls.
Before the invention of the cannon, castle wall-busting projectiles had been thrown by trebuchets.
This is what took over from the trebuchet. Far easier to move from castle to castle.
Its design was simplicity itself, drawing on the skills of the barrel maker.
This has metal staves lengthways and then lots of hoops holding those staves under compression. So this is why we now call this the gun barrel as well.
The bombard was no more powerful than a trebuchet, but it did have a psychological impact on the enemy.
If we take it back several hundred years and the loudest thing is a cockerel crowing or a brawl in the pub on a Saturday night, these things are horrendously frightening.
As metallurgy improved, barrels could be made longer, increasing accuracy and power. They progressed from taking down walls to taking out soldiers, replacing the bow and arrow.
A typical arrow would get stuck in this sort of material, where ball just goes straight through. So compared to a bow and arrow, this is far more deadly.
During the 100 Years' War, there was even a precursor to the machine gun, the Ribauldequin.
She's got several barrels on her. This is the sort of gun that would have been very much against people being able to spread your shot out and hit large numbers of people in one go.
Gunpowder revolutionized warfare throughout the 100 Years' War, changing the way battles were fought forever. Before the invention of printing in the 15th century, books were painstakingly copied by hand. The finest were illuminated with brilliant colors and real gold. Illuminated text wasn't just for show. Gilded illustrations decorated important passages to highlight their significance.
Gold was used in many medieval manuscripts from early days because it was very expensive and it indicated that the manuscript itself was valuable. The light would reflect from candles or from the sunlight, and so it looked as though the book itself was illuminated. In medieval manuscripts, it looks as though this is solid gold. In fact, it's not. The gold itself is tissue thin.
The solid appearance is achieved by laying the gold on a cushion of plaster mixed with glue, called gesso.
By raising the gold from the surface of the skin, that means that it catches the light even more.
The glue in the gesso is softened by breathing on it.
We then have 3 seconds to get the gold on, and I'm using a burnisher, which is a polished stone, just to make sure that the gold sticks. Then the burnisher is used to polish the gold up. See, it's coming up now. So it's coming nice and shiny.
Next, the miniature is painted.
The base colour will be done first, then the tints and the shades will be added, and finally, the white highlights and the outline, which lifts it and brings the whole thing to life.
The medieval paint box contained pigments from across the world, such as ultramarine from Afghanistan and orpiment gathered from volcanic craters.
It often took a long time to complete these medieval miniatures. This one between a month and 6 weeks, from start to finish.
An entire book could take a team of illuminators several years to complete. Many medieval manuscripts still survive today, fully preserved, with their colours just as vivid as the day they were illustrated. Thanks to the explosive force of cannon fire, the French were close to victory in this century-long war. But in a final grasp at power, the English dispatched a fresh army, equipped with their tried and tested longbows. Formigny would be a trial of old versus new, to determine the fate of France. English commander Sir Thomas Kyriel sent a large expedition to crush the French in Normandy. The village of Carentan was directly in their path. Massively outnumbered, the French skirmishers near Carentan would give their lives to weaken the English.
Well, this is a battle we cannot possibly win. Best thing we can do is kind of force the enemies into a bit of a choke point on the far right, and then just pick off as many enemies as we can on the left, really. I don't think it makes any real difference to the outcome of this this mission, honestly. Like whether you kill them here or later, doesn't really save any time either way, to be honest. As far as I can tell, anyway.
Though they fought bravely, the French skirmishers could only slow the English advance. The main body of the French army finally arrived in the river valley. The French now needed to locate and destroy the English army, but they would face a well-entrenched enemy with several local garrisons.
So we're going to be doing a bit of divide and conquer on this mission. We're going to be pulling a small fraction of our main forces away to focus on a settlement that is going to be attacked by the English, which will allow us to focus on upgrades. Meanwhile, the main bulk of our army does the majority of the heavy lifting, as you'd expect. So the bulk of the army is actually going to completely ignore this garrison, because it's just a waste of time, honestly. And we can secure Birkebeck with the splinter forces that we have. More than enough to deal with what they have. We'll pick up as much gold as we can in the area. both with the main force and the splinter force.
The French destroyed the garrison at Briquebec.
Gold actually has a very real use in this mission. It is used to upgrade our army, which will be super useful for the upcoming major battles. Gonna grab ourselves a couple of monks as well from that French monastery. They'll be useful in healing the boys.
French forces found a detachment of the English army attacking the town of Valognes. If they could stop the attack, they might gain valuable resources. With the English attack on Valognes halted, the citizens moved to support the French army. The English base at Saint-Sauveur fell to the French forces, but the enemy army was still at large.
Right, there we go. Regroup the armies now. As we make our way up north.
Évidemment, à part même.
So everyone want flaming archers first, and then we want a speed of the arquebusists to be improved next, and then range damage is the last upgrade we want.
The French forces located Kyril's English army at a river crossing near the town of Formigny. Several of the Bureau brothers' heavy guns and other forces arrived to help.
Okay, we're just gonna want to spread our forces out a little bit here.
Even with their cannons, the French faced the difficult task of engaging the well-positioned English army. The French received word that their Breton allies had arrived with their knights and horsemen. Now the two armies could coordinate. The Bretons saw an opportunity to attack the English from the back. As the Bretons attacked, the English had no choice but to pivot their front line, opening their flanks to attack from the French. Beset by the French and Bretons, the English beat a hasty retreat toward Formigny. The English survivors entered Formigny. The French would have to take this town to secure victory.
The irony is you didn't even need the gunpowder units. GG's.
With the last English army destroyed and the gates of Formigny thrown open, the French force in Normandy was victorious. Their well-organized forces and superior firepower had brought the arduous 100 Years' War closer to its conclusion. At Formigny, the roar of cannon fire sounded the death knell for England's ambitions in France. King Charles and the Bureau brothers did not let up on the offensive, and in 1453, the English retreated across the Channel. France was finally at peace. More than 100 years had passed since the first English Chevauchees had scorched the land. The iconic French knights who fought in those early days would not have recognized their own military a century later. The English longbow, once the scourge of France, was no match for French artillery in the last years of the war. And by 1453, France's border looked very different, growing to encompass territories once claimed by England and their allies. After enduring a century of conflict, France emerged as a transformed nation. The country and its people had persevered and unified into a kingdom that could defend itself. Against all odds, France had won the 100 Years' War.